How many wrong suspects does it take to catch a killer?
The morning of July 20, 2015 began like any other summer day in Whitesboro, New York. The air was warm and still, sunlight spilling gently over the tidy lawns of suburban homes. Inside one of them, an unassuming two-story house on Clinton Street, Dr. Mary Yoder was getting ready for work. She moved briskly, humming under her breath, her hair pinned neatly back. At 60 years old, she looked younger, vibrant, healthy, full of the quiet energy that her patients often remarked upon. She was a chiropractor, running the family practice with her husband, Bill. Together, they had built Yoder Chiropractic from the ground up, earning the loyalty of dozens of families across the small town. Their practice wasn't just a place for spinal adjustments, it was a community hub, a place where patients felt seen, heard, and healed. Mary made sure of that. That morning, though, she felt slightly off. She'd had mild stomach discomfort the night before, but she brushed it aside. "Probably something I ate," she told Bill with a smile. "You know me, too much hummus again." He chuckled, kissed her on the forehead, and they headed out. At the office, Mary's assistant, Caitlin Conley, was already there. At 23, Caitlin was bright, organized, and deeply familiar with the rhythms of the clinic. She had worked for the Yoders for over 2 years and had dated their son, Adam, on and off. The relationship had ended a few months prior, and though things had been awkward, everyone had agreed to stay civil. Caitlin, after all, was good at her job, and Mary, ever empathetic, didn't want personal matters to cloud professional ones. "Morning, Dr. Yoder," Caitlin greeted cheerfully as Mary entered. "I set up the patient files and ordered more supplements." "Thank you, Caitlin," Mary said warmly. "You're always one step ahead." The day went as usual. Patients came and went, the soft sound of the adjustment table, the rhythmic clicking of spine realignments, the hum of conversation. But by mid-afternoon, Mary began to feel faint. Sweat gathered on her forehead, and she felt waves of nausea rising from deep inside her. "I'm just going to sit down for a moment," she murmured to Caitlin. "You don't look well," Caitlin said, concern crossing her face. "Maybe you should go home." Mary nodded. "Yes, maybe that's best." By evening, she was violently ill. Bill urged her to rest while he fetched water and called their son Adam. "She's throwing up nonstop," Bill said into the phone, panic creeping into his voice. "I think we should take her to the hospital." At Faxton St. Luke's Healthcare, the doctors were puzzled. Mary's symptoms, severe vomiting, diarrhea, muscle weakness, could have been food poisoning, but her condition worsened far too quickly. Within 24 hours, her organs began to fail. Her heart struggled, her blood pressure dropped dangerously low. On July 22, 2015, just 2 days after she first fell ill, Dr. Mary Yoder was pronounced dead. The news sent shockwaves through the community. Friends, patients, colleagues, all were stunned. "She was so healthy," people said. "She biked every morning. She ate organic food. How could this happen?" At first, the Yoder family accepted the hospital's conclusion that it must have been a rare viral infection. But Adam couldn't shake the feeling that something didn't add up. "She didn't get sick," he told a friend later. "She was poisoned. I just don't know by who." Mary's funeral drew hundreds. The church was filled with flowers and stories of her kindness. Bill stood tall, stoic, but his eyes were empty. Adam sat beside him, rigid, staring into nothing. Caitlin was there too, sitting quietly near the back. When she approached the casket, she cried softly, touching Mary's hand. "You didn't deserve this," she whispered. A few weeks later, the coroner's report came back. It revealed something startling. Traces of colchicine in Mary's blood. Colchicine is a medication to treat gout, harmless in tiny doses, but deadly in slightly larger ones. Her levels were astronomically high. The cause of death was officially ruled homicide by poisoning. The Yoder family was stunned. "Who would poison her?" Bill asked, trembling. "She didn't have enemies." Investigators began by retracing Mary's final days, her meals, her medications, her supplements. They interviewed everyone at the clinic, including Caitlin. "Did she take anything unusual?" they asked. Caitlin shook her head. "Not that I saw," she said quietly. "She just didn't feel well that day." Detectives noted her calm demeanor. Nothing seemed out of place until they checked the office computer.
In late August, investigators obtained a search warrant for the clinic's computer records. What they found would shift the entire investigation. On one of the office computers, used primarily by Caitlin, there were Google searches for how to poison someone, colchicine toxicity, and lethal doses. The searches dated back several weeks before Mary's death. Further digging revealed that someone had ordered colchicine online, shipped to a P.O. box under a pseudonym. The payment method? A prepaid card purchased in Whitesboro at a store less than a mile from Caitlin's home. When confronted, Caitlin appeared shocked. "That's not me," she said. "Anyone could have used that computer. We all share it." But investigators weren't convinced. They found more. A typed letter sent anonymously to the Yoder family, claiming that Adam, Mary's own son, had poisoned his mother. The letter described suspicious behavior, urging police to look closely at Adam's online activity. But when forensic analysts examined the letter, the printer's ink and formatting matched the computer in the clinic. Again, the one used by Caitlin. "She's framing him," one investigator muttered during a briefing. "She's trying to shift the blame." On June 22, 2016, nearly a year after Mary's death, police arrived at Caitlin Conley's apartment. She opened the door, startled to find officers and detectives standing there. "Miss Conley," said Detective O'Neill, "you are under arrest for the murder of Dr. Mary Yoder." Her face went pale. "What? No, you can't be serious. I loved her." As she was led away in handcuffs, neighbors peeked through curtains. The news spread fast. The Yoder's assistant arrested for murder. The small town buzzed with disbelief. Inside the police car, Caitlin sat silent, staring straight ahead. Her hands trembled slightly, but her expression remained unreadable. At the station, she was interrogated for hours. "Why would you poison her?" the detectives pressed. "Did you want revenge on Adam? Were you jealous? Angry?" Caitlin's voice was quiet, but steady. "I didn't do this. I swear I didn't." The arrest shattered the Yoder family again. Bill, heartbroken, couldn't reconcile the image of the sweet young woman who'd worked beside them with the accusation that she'd murdered his wife. Adam, though, was conflicted. He had loved Caitlin once, deeply. Their relationship had been volatile, full of breakups and reconciliations, but he had never imagined she could do something like this. "She's not capable of murder," he told detectives at first. But as more evidence surfaced, emails, texts, online orders, his certainty began to crumble. In one message, Caitlin had written to a friend months before Mary's death, "I just wish people would suffer the way they made me suffer." It wasn't direct proof, but it painted a chilling picture. As the case prepared to go to trial, Whitesboro became divided. Some believed Caitlin was innocent, a scapegoat caught in a web of circumstantial evidence. Others were sure she was guilty, a woman driven by heartbreak and vengeance. In 2017, Caitlin Conley stood before a packed courtroom charged with second-degree murder. Her defense argued that the evidence was purely circumstantial. There were no witnesses, no fingerprints on the poison bottle, no direct proof she administered it. The prosecution countered that the digital trail was irrefutable. They showed search histories, chemical purchases, and the anonymous letter attempting to frame Adam. "She knew how to poison," the prosecutor said, pacing before the jury. "She knew what to use, and she knew who to blame." Caitlin sat quietly at the defense table, her face expressionless. But when Adam took the stand, she looked away. He testified that their breakup had been painful. "She didn't take it well," he said softly. "She kept reaching out, wanting to talk. I thought we could stay friends. I was wrong." The jury deliberated for days, but they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict. Some believed she was guilty, others doubted. The judge declared a mistrial. As she left the courtroom, Caitlin turned to reporters and whispered, "I didn't kill her." But the prosecution wasn't done.
The mistrial in 2017 left the town of Whitesboro suspended in a strange, uneasy quiet. For some, it was relief. The case hadn't ended in a conviction that felt uncertain. For others, it was frustration. A killer was still free. But for the Yoder family, it was agony. Bill Yoder sat in his living room night after night, surrounded by old photographs of Mary, their wedding portrait, vacations, snapshots from the clinic. He played her voice messages over and over on his phone, listening to her laughter, the way she'd say, "Hi, honey," before hanging up. He couldn't rest. "We can't let her death go unanswered," he told his son Adam. "If Caitlin did this, and I believe she did, she needs to face the consequences." Adam nodded, but his heart was heavy. He had once loved Caitlin. She wasn't a monster in his memories. She was the girl who made him laugh, who brought him coffee at the office, who stayed up with him watching movies. Yet, as the evidence accumulated, his picture of her blurred into something darker, harder to explain. The district attorney's office announced almost immediately that they would retry the case. This time, they were more aggressive. They had refined their theory, tightened their arguments, and planned to present the digital evidence in an even clearer way. The new prosecutor, Christopher Pelly, was sharp, calm, and relentless. He told reporters before the trial, "We are confident the evidence will show that Caitlin Conley deliberately and knowingly poisoned Mary Yoder." The defense team, now led by a seasoned criminal lawyer named Edward Zumpano, braced for battle. Their strategy was simple: discredit the evidence and cast reasonable doubt. "Digital footprints can be misleading," Zumpano said in his opening statement. "Computers can be used by anyone, searches can be accidental, and grief can make people see guilt where none exists." Caitlin sat beside him, wearing a pale blue blouse and no makeup. She looked subdued, fragile even. Reporters whispered that she seemed almost ghost-like compared to the bright young woman who once worked cheerfully at the Yoder clinic. From the first day, the trial drew crowds. Every seat in the gallery was filled. Family, journalists, curious townspeople. The courtroom buzzed with tension. Prosecutor Pelly began by walking the jury through the timeline. He said, "Mary Yoder fell ill on July 20th. She died 2 days later. The autopsy showed lethal levels of colchicine. This was no accident." He displayed a series of slides, screenshots of the online searches traced to the clinic computer. Colchicine dosage lethal. Poison that can't be detected. How long does colchicine stay in the body? Then he pointed to a date on the screen, June 20th, 2015. "That's when the colchicine was ordered," he said. And the order came from the Yoder office computer. The same computer that Ms. Conley used every day. One of the trial's most chilling pieces of evidence was the anonymous letter sent to police after Mary's death, the letter accusing Adam Yoder of the crime. An FBI forensic analyst testified that the document was typed on the same model of printer found in the Yoder office and matched the formatting style of previous documents written by Caitlin. More tellingly, investigators had found DNA traces on the envelope flap. They were partial, degraded, but they were consistent with Caitlin's genetic profile. The courtroom went silent as the evidence technician described the envelope being opened, the faint trace of saliva detected. The prosecutor let the weight of the moment sink in before he asked, "If you loved Mary Yoder as you say you did, why did you try to frame her son for her murder?" Caitlin didn't answer. Her attorney objected, and the judge sustained it. But the question hung in the air, heavy and poisonous.
When it was the defense's turn, Zumpano focused on dismantling the prosecution's certainty. He called cybersecurity experts who testified that multiple people could have used the same computer. "There's no physical proof she was at the keyboard during those searches," one said. He also challenged the chain of custody of the colchicine evidence. "No vial, no residue, no bottle was ever found in her possession," Zumpano emphasized. "And there's zero proof she administered anything."
Finally, he questioned the reliability of the digital forensics. Technology is not perfect, he told the jury, and the prosecution's theory depends entirely on technology. Throughout the trial, Caitlin maintained her composure. She cried quietly only once, when a photo of Mary was shown to the jury, smiling, alive. "I loved her," Caitlin whispered to her attorney. "She was like a second mother to me." But outside the courtroom, whispers persisted. Some said her tears were calculated. Others said they saw true grief in her eyes. When Adam Yoder took the stand again, the air thickened with tension. He spoke softly, carefully, but emotion flickered behind his calm demeanor. "Caitlin and I, we had a complicated relationship," he admitted. "We broke up, got back together, broke up again. I wanted to move on. She didn't." The prosecution asked if Caitlin ever showed resentment toward his mother. Adam hesitated. "Not openly," he said, "but she used to say things like, 'Your mom doesn't like me, she wants us apart.' I'd tell her that wasn't true, but she didn't believe it." The defense cross-examined, painting Adam as unreliable, a heartbroken ex-boyfriend trying to justify his own guilt. But Adam stayed composed. "I didn't poison my mother," he said, his voice breaking. "I just want justice for her." After 6 weeks of testimony, closing arguments began. The prosecution's final statement was devastating. "This case is about obsession," Pelly said, his voice rising. "It's about a young woman who couldn't let go, who chose revenge over forgiveness, and in doing so, took the life of a kind, innocent woman." He turned toward the jury. "She didn't just kill Mary Yoder. She tried to destroy the Yoder family." The defense countered with an appeal to reason. "Don't let emotion guide your verdict," Zimpano urged. "Don't convict a woman on possibilities. Convict only on proof." The jury deliberated for 2 full days. When they returned, everyone held their breath. The clerk stood and read aloud. "On the charge of murder in the second degree, we find the defendant not guilty." A murmur swept through the courtroom. Caitlin closed her eyes in relief, for a moment. Then the clerk continued. "On the lesser charge of manslaughter in first degree, we find the defendant guilty." Caitlin gasped. Her hands trembled as the words sank in. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Her parents sobbed quietly in the front row. Adam looked down, unable to meet her eyes. The judge thanked the jury and announced sentencing would follow in several weeks. Caitlin whispered, "I didn't do this," as deputies led her away. On January 8, 2018, Caitlin Conley returned to court for sentencing. Her family sat behind her, praying for leniency. Bill and Adam Yoder sat on the other side, solemn and silent. Before the sentence was read, each side was allowed to speak. Bill stood first. His voice was low but steady. "My wife was my best friend," he said. "She gave everything to her patients, to her family, to her community. What happened to her was cruel and senseless. I hope one day the person responsible understands the pain they've caused." Caitlin's father spoke next. He begged the court to show mercy. "He's not a killer," he said through tears. "She made mistakes, but she's not evil." Finally, Caitlin stood. Her voice shook. "I loved Mary," she said. "I would never hurt her. I don't know how this happened, but I swear I'm innocent." The judge looked down at her, expression grave. "Miss Conley, a jury has found you guilty of taking a life. The court must impose a sentence commensurate with the gravity of that act." He paused, then delivered the sentence. 23 years in state prison. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Caitlin's mother sobbed quietly. Bill Yoder bowed his head. As Caitlin was led away in handcuffs, she turned once toward Adam. Their eyes met for a fleeting second. Neither spoke. Caitlin entered Bedford Hills Correctional Facility in early 2018. The days were long, monotonous, filled with the dull rhythm of prison life. She taught classes for other inmates, kept mostly to herself, and spent hours writing letters to her family, to friends, even to journalists. In every one, she insisted she was innocent. "I didn't kill Mary," she wrote in one letter. "Someone else did, maybe even someone in that house. They needed a scapegoat, and I was convenient." Her letters went largely ignored, until one day in 2023 when a documentary crew from ABC's 2020 reached out. They were filming a multi-part special titled Little Miss Innocent: Passion, Poison, Prison. Caitlin agreed to speak. In the interview, she appeared composed but weary. "They wanted someone to blame," she said. "They took a grieving family and turned them against me. I lost my freedom, my name, my life, all for something I didn't do." The show aired nationwide, reigniting debate about her guilt. Viewers flooded social media. "She seems genuine." "No way, she's manipulative." "Maybe it was Adam." The case once again divided the public, just as it had divided the Yoder family years earlier. While she served her sentence, Caitlin's lawyers continued to appeal. They argued that her trial attorney had been ineffective, that evidence from her phone was obtained beyond the scope of the warrant, that the jury instructions were flawed. In 2025, nearly 7 years after her conviction, the New York Appellate Division finally issued its decision. They ruled that the search of Caitlin's phone had indeed exceeded the limits of the warrant, and that her attorney's failure to challenge it was a constitutional error. Her conviction was vacated. When the news reached her cell, Caitlin didn't cry. She simply closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Within days, she was released. Reporters waited outside the prison gates the morning she walked free. Cameras flashed as she stepped into the sunlight, dressed in plain gray clothes, holding a small bag of her belongings. "Do you have anything to say, Caitlin?" one shouted. She paused, turned toward the cameras, and said quietly, "I told the truth from the beginning. I didn't kill Mary Yoder." Then she got into her parents' car and drove away. But freedom didn't mean closure. The Oneida County District Attorney's Office announced they were reviewing the case again, possibly to present it to a new grand jury. "The vacating of a conviction does not erase the evidence," a spokesperson said. "We owe it to the Yoder family and to justice to determine what happens next." Bill Yoder, now older and grayer, gave a brief statement. "We still believe in the system. We still believe in the truth." Adam stayed silent. Caitlin moved to a quiet town upstate, keeping to herself. She avoided interviews, though her name continued to trend online. Some called her the poisoned scapegoat. Others still called her the killer chiropractor's assistant. The truth, whatever it was, remained tangled between grief, love, and suspicion. The winter of 2025 settled over upstate New York in a sheet of ice and silence. Snow draped itself across the roofs and fields of Whitesboro, softening the sharp edges of a town that for a decade had lived beneath the shadow of Mary Yoder's death. People had grown used to the story. They could tell it by heart. Yet when Caitlin walked free that February morning, everything cracked open again. At Yoder Chiropractic, the sign still bore Mary's name, though the lights inside had long been dimmed. Bill Yoder had retired quietly 2 years before, unable to walk the halls without feeling her presence. He had packed up her diplomas, the framed testimonials from patients, even the potted fern she had kept on her desk. But when news of Caitlin's release broke, he found himself unlocking the door again. The waiting room smelled of dust and faint disinfectant. Bill stood there for a long while, staring at the empty reception chair where Caitlin had once sat. She's out, and Mary's still gone. That evening, local stations replayed footage from the courthouse. Reporters spoke over old clips of the trial. Mary's smiling photograph, Caitlin led in handcuffs, and Adam on the witness stand. Caitlin's conviction has been vacated by the appellate division. Prosecutors now face a choice: retry the case or let it rest.
In downtown Utica, inside the Oneida County DA's office, a small team pored over boxes of evidence. Assistant DA Rachel Mendez, newly promoted and untainted by the original case, ran her hand across the top file. "It's all here," she said. "Lab reports, computer forensics, phone records, but some of the evidence might not even be admissible now." Her boss, District Attorney Thomas Borelli, sighed. "That's the problem. If we try her again, everything about that phone search gets thrown out. And without it, what do we really have?" Mendez looked uneasy. "Still, there's the Colchicine order, the anonymous letter, her proximity to Mary." "Circumstantial," Borelli said. "We built a mountain of theory on a handful of digital footprints, and now that mountain's crumbling." He closed the file. "We'll convene a grand jury. Let them see everything. Let them decide whether there's enough left for a new indictment." Caitlin spent her first months of freedom in near seclusion. She lived with her parents in a modest house outside Syracuse, rarely venturing beyond the yard. Freedom, she quickly learned, wasn't the same as peace. Her name, once whispered in small-town gossip, was now debated online. Hundreds of forums, podcasts, documentaries. Some called her vindicated, others called her lucky. She tried not to look, but the comments always found their way to her phone. One morning, she walked to the edge of a frozen lake near her house. The air was knife-cold, the surface of the water silver and still. She crouched, touching her fingertips to the ice. "I survived, but I didn't win." She began journaling again. Long, careful entries written in a cheap notebook. She wrote about Mary Yoder's laugh, about Adam's smile, about the suffocating isolation of prison. And she wrote about the question that haunted her: who really killed Mary? Because deep inside, even she wasn't entirely certain anymore. Adam Yoder had left Whitesboro years ago, moving to Rochester and opening his own chiropractic practice. He tried to rebuild his life, but his mother's death had carved a permanent hollow in him. When Caitlin's release hit the news, reporters sought his comment. He refused every interview. Until one evening in April, when a local journalist caught him leaving his office. "Do you believe Caitlin Conley is innocent?" Adam paused, adjusting his coat against the wind. "I believe my mother was murdered, and I believe someone is still lying about it." "Do you think it could have been someone else?" His eyes hardened. "I don't know anymore, but I want the truth, even if it hurts." The next day, he drove to his father's house. Bill was in the garage sanding an old piece of furniture. "They're taking it back to a grand jury," Adam said. Bill looked up. "Good. Maybe they'll finally see the truth again." Adam hesitated. "And if they don't?" Bill's hand stilled. "Then we live with a world that lets murder go unpunished." By May 2025, the Oneida County Grand Jury convened behind closed doors. Witnesses were called, evidence re-examined. The process was secret, but rumors leaked about new forensic reviews, about missing computer logs, about a long-ignored witness. One leak in particular caught the public's attention. A lab technician claimed that a trace of colchicine had once been detected on a supplement bottle from Mary Yoder's kitchen, but that the test was never repeated due to procedural oversight. The technician suggested that the contamination could have come before the bottle ever reached the clinic. The implication was explosive. What if the poison hadn't been administered at the office at all? Local headlines screamed, "New twist in Yoder poisoning," and social media lit up. Some said it vindicated Caitlin completely. Others said it only deepened the mystery. For weeks, the jury deliberated. And then, nothing. The DA's office issued a brief statement. "The grand jury has completed its review. At this time, no new indictments will be filed."
Caitlin's lawyer called it a victory. Bill Yoder called it a betrayal. They gave up. They let her walk. My wife's Curter walks free.
In September 2025, streaming giant True North released a 4-part series titled Colchicine, The Killing of Dr. Mary Yoder. It reconstructed the case in cinematic detail, interviews with detectives, family members, jurors, and forensic experts. The final episode featured an extended sit-down with Caitlin herself. Sitting in a small studio lit by a single soft lamp, she spoke directly to the camera. "I've been painted as a villain for 10 years," she said. "But if I wanted revenge, why would I stay? Why would I work in that office every day after she died? I wanted answers too." The interviewer leaned forward. "Then who do you think killed Mary Yoder?" Caitlin's expression darkened. "I don't know," she said slowly, "but someone in that house does." The final minutes of the episode intercut her words with footage of the Yoder home, quiet and empty. The credits rolled to the sound of wind over snow. Viewers were split. Some believed her. Others saw manipulation in every calm, measured phrase. But the series reignited national fascination with the case and reopened the wound for everyone involved. Late that year, Bill Yoder wrote an open letter to the local paper. It was only a page long, but it broke hearts across the state. "People tell me to move on," he wrote. "They don't understand that time doesn't heal murder. Time only makes the silence louder. Whoever took Mary from me is still out there. And every night I ask God, why?" He ended with a plea. "If you know something, anything, say it. Let my wife rest." The letter went viral. 1,000 messages flooded his inbox, some sympathetic, some hateful, some from amateur sleuths offering new theories. One message, though, stood out. It came from a retired pharmacist in Buffalo. He claimed he remembered filling a suspicious online order for colchicine under a pseudonym, an order placed not from Whitesboro, but from another nearby town entirely. He included the pseudonym, KTC. Investigators followed up, but the trail had gone cold. The pharmacy records were destroyed years earlier. Still, the coincidence stirred old doubts. Was it Caitlin's order, after all, or a clever imitation by someone else? By autumn, Caitlin had enrolled in community college courses studying psychology. She said she wanted to understand why people believe what they believe. Sometimes she would drive through Whitesboro at night, past the clinic's dark windows, past the church where Mary's funeral had been held. She never stopped, but she always slowed, watching the streetlights flicker across the sign that still bore the Yoder name. In those moments, guilt and anger intertwined, though for what she could never quite say. Adam, meanwhile, was building a life of quiet solitude. He married briefly, then divorced. He told friends he was haunted by two faces, his mother's and Caitlin's. "Every time I think I understand what happened, I realize I don't know anything at all," he said once. In December 2025, 10 years after Mary Yoder's death, the local paper ran a retrospective titled A Decade of Doubt. It recounted the whole saga, the sudden illness, the poison, the trials, the overturned conviction. The final line read, "The death of Dr. Mary Yoder remains, in the truest sense, unsolved." That winter, Bill placed a single candle in his front window, as he did every year on the anniversary of her passing. He stood there a long time, the flame reflected in his eyes. Miles away, Caitlin sat by her own window, staring at the same snow. She opened her journal and wrote one last entry. "I wish I could tell her I'm sorry. Not because I did it, but because she's gone, and nothing I say will ever bring her back. Maybe forgiveness isn't about guilt. Maybe it's about surviving what people think you are." She closed the notebook, exhaled, and turned off the light.
Outside, the snow kept falling, soft, endless, erasing tracks.